Backstage at a grand old theater in Los Angeles in the spring of 1975, George Carlin stood in the dark and listened to a sound that did not belong to him. Applause. Warm, endless, certain. It rolled off the stage and washed over the wings where he waited, and it belonged to the man standing in the light, Bob Hope. 60 years of America loved that man. Presidents took his calls. Soldiers wrote him letters. When Bob Hope raised an eyebrow, an entire nation leaned in and smiled. And in 19 minutes, George Carlin was supposed to follow him. A young stage manager with a clipboard leaned close to Carlin's ear and repeated the only instruction that mattered that night. Keep it clean. Keep it short. Keep it safe. The cameras were live. The audience was old money and network men in dark suits. Carlin nodded. He always nodded. But the stage manager did not see what Carlin was holding in his mind. A decision he had not told anyone. A decision that could end the good thing he had only just rebuilt. 2 years earlier, he had been arrested for the words he said on a stage. He had clawed his way back to rooms like this one, rooms that could put him back on television, rooms that could make him safe again. And now he stood in the dark behind the most beloved comedian alive, deciding whether to be safe or to be himself. What George Carlin did in the next 20 minutes, no one in that theater ever forgot, and almost no one has told it since. To understand what that stage meant, you have to understand what Bob Hope was in 1975. He was not simply a comedian. He was an institution, as much a part of American life as the flag behind him. For 40 years he had told jokes that never frightened anyone. Quick, polished, gentle jokes about golf and taxes and his own famous nose. He had entertained troops in 3 wars. He had hosted the Oscars so many times the country half believed the job was his by birth. Bob Hope was the sound of a comfortable America, the America that ate dinner at 6 and trusted the men on television. And the room that night was built in his image. Studio executives, sponsors, older couples in their finest clothes who had driven in for a night of clean, familiar laughter. Nobody in that theater had bought a ticket to be challenged. This was the establishment at its warmest and its most certain. For a comedian like Carlin, it was the safest room in America and the most dangerous. Safe because all he had to do was smile and give them the soft, easy version of himself, and he would be welcomed back into the fold. Dangerous because that same welcome had a price. The price was silence. The price was becoming exactly the kind of comedian he had spent years fighting to stop being. Bob Hope had never paid that price, because he never had to. He was born for this room. George Carlin was not, and everyone backstage knew it. Just a few years before, George Carlin would have fit that room perfectly. He had worn the neat suits. He had cut his hair short and combed it flat. He had gone on the same television shows and told the same tidy jokes, and America had liked him well enough. He had a nice house, a nice contract, a nice, safe career. And it had nearly killed the part of him that mattered. Somewhere in the late 1960s, standing in yet another Las Vegas showroom telling jokes he no longer believed, Carlin had looked at the polished man in the mirror and felt like a stranger. So he burned it down. He grew his hair long. He grew a beard. He traded the suit for denim and began saying out loud the things he actually thought about language, about power, about the quiet lies people agreed to tell each other. The clean-cut television comedian disappeared. In his place stood a sharper, freer man, and the audiences who found him loved him with an intensity the old Carlin had never known. But freedom came with a bill. In 1972, he had been arrested for a routine about 7 words. Bookings dried up. Nervous producers stopped calling. He had spent the 2 years since carefully, patiently proving he was safe enough to trust again. Which is what made this night so cruel. This benefit was the reward for being good. All he had to do to keep it was be a little less himself. And standing in the wings behind Bob Hope, he could feel the old, comfortable comedian whispering, "Just this once, take the easy laugh." The applause for Bob Hope began to fade, and the machinery of the night moved on without mercy. Out in the theater, Hope tipped an imaginary hat, delivered one last soft joke about his age, and strolled into the wings on the opposite side, trailing laughter like perfume. As he passed, an assistant handed him a towel and a drink. He had done exactly what he always did, and it had worked exactly as it always did. Now the stage was empty, and the empty stage was waiting for Carlin. The producer appeared at his shoulder, not the young stage manager this time, but the man whose name was on the show. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. 20 good minutes, the producer said quietly. Just give them 20 good minutes, and everybody goes home happy. He let the words sit. Then he added the part that was really a warning. This is not the kind of crowd for the other stuff, George. Carlin understood exactly what the other stuff meant. It meant the truth. It meant the material that got him arrested. It meant him. He looked out past the curtain at the sea of gray heads and dark suits, at the network cameras with their red lights already glowing, at the safe, warm room that would forgive him everything if he would only behave. The band started the small musical sting that meant his name was coming. For one long second, George Carlin closed his eyes. And then he heard the announcer say his name, and the decision that had been waiting in the dark finally had nowhere left to hide. George Carlin walked out into the light. The applause that met him was polite, curious, a little cautious. These people knew the name, and some of them knew the trouble that came with it. And they clapped the way you clap for a storm you hope will pass over your house. He crossed to the microphone, and for a moment he simply stood there and let them look at him. The long hair, the beard, the denim among all those dinner jackets. He looked like a visitor from a country the people in those seats had heard about on the news and did not entirely trust. And in that silence, Carlin felt both roads laid out in front of him with perfect clarity. One road was easy. He could feel the safe jokes sitting ready on his tongue, the light, harmless bits that would have made Bob Hope proud and sent the network men home smiling. 20 good minutes, his career warm and intact. The whisper in the wings had followed him into the light. Just this once. The other road was steeper, and he could not see the bottom of it. He gripped the microphone. He looked at the red camera light. He thought about the man he used to be, the neat, comfortable stranger in the mirror, and about everything it had cost to stop being him. Then George Carlin leaned into the microphone and made his choice. Not with a shout, not with a curse, but with a single quiet observation about the room itself. The kind of thing only he would ever notice. The kind of thing you cannot take back. It began small. He looked out at all those comfortable, well-dressed people who had come for an easy night, and instead of flattering them, he described them, gently, precisely. The little rituals of the room, the way they had all agreed to laugh only at the safe things, the polite fictions everyone in expensive seats tells each other, the words they used to avoid the words they meant. He was not cruel. That was the astonishing part. He held the mirror up so kindly that, for a heartbeat, the room did not know whether to be insulted or delighted. And then the first real laugh broke. Not the warm, automatic laugh they had given Bob Hope, but something sharper, something surprised. The laugh of people catching themselves in a true thing. It spread. It built. Carlin felt it and rose to meet it. He talked about language and the quiet lies inside ordinary words, about the way powerful people hide behind soft phrases, about the difference between being polite and being honest. He never reached for the forbidden words that had gotten him arrested. He did not need them. He had found something more dangerous than any curse. He was telling 400 comfortable people the truth about themselves and making them love him for it. The network men in the back stopped checking their watches. The older couples leaned forward. Somewhere in the wings, holding a towel, Bob Hope had turned around to watch. For 20 minutes, George Carlin stood in the safest room in America and refused, completely and joyfully, to be safe. And the room, against everything it had come to protect, went with him. When he finished, the sound that came back at him was not polite. It was loud, and it was real, and it went on longer than anyone had planned for. The old couples in their good clothes were on the edge of their seats. Some of them were laughing still, wiping their eyes, turning to each other with the particular look of people who had come expecting one thing and been given something better. Carlin gave a small nod, not a showman's bow, just an acknowledgement, and walked off into the wings. And that is where the part almost no one talks about happened. Bob Hope was waiting for him. The most famous comedian in America, the man whose entire career had been built on never frightening anyone, stood in the shadows with his towel over his shoulder and watched George Carlin come off that stage. The two men could not have been more different. Everything Hope had spent 60 years avoiding, Carlin had just walked into on purpose. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Bob Hope smiled, a real one, not the television one, and said something quiet that only Carlin heard. Later, when people asked Carlin about that night, he would repeat it, and it always stopped the conversation. Hope told him, "I could never have gotten away with that." It was not a complaint. It was not even entirely a compliment. It was one master watching another do the one thing he had never dared to do, and being honest enough, for once, to say so. Then Hope patted him on the shoulder and walked back toward the safe, warm world he ruled, and Carlin let him go. They never shared a stage like that again. Bob Hope went on being Bob Hope, beloved and untouched, for another 20 years. George Carlin went on being George Carlin, sharper, darker, more honest with every passing decade, until the whole country finally caught up to the man who had once been too dangerous for a Tuesday night benefit. But those who were in that theater in the spring of 1975 carried the night with them, because they had witnessed something rarer than a good comedy set. They had watched a man stand in the exact room designed to make him small, in the shadow of the safest comedian alive, with everything to lose, and choose to tell the truth anyway. That was the whole of George Carlin, compressed into 20 minutes. Not the arrests, not the forbidden words. The choice underneath all of it, the refusal to trade himself for comfort, even when comfort was being handed to him on a silver plate. Bob Hope's line lingered because it was true. He could never have gotten away with it. But it was more than a matter of talent. Hope had never wanted to. Carlin could not have lived any other way. And maybe that is why the story stays. Because all of us, at some point, stand in our own safe, warm room with the easy version of ourselves whispering, "Just this once." Most of us take the easy laugh. George Carlin, on a night nobody remembers to write down, stood behind the most beloved man in America and didn't. And the room, at last, was his.